So, since we were talking about UN, I also want to, your first book, Perilous Interventions, is actually prophetic. If you now look back at what you wrote about Iraq and Libya. And let's talk a little bit about what's happening in Libya and what you actually foresaw.
Well, it's very worrisome. Nitin, it's very worrisome. There's no satisfaction and no joy to be derived from the fact that I told you so. I have maintained all along that the unraveling of the Arab Spring, look, I have no doubt that there was a genuine domestic yearning for democracy. I have no doubt about that. Sure. But, at the end of the day, that domestic quest for peace and democracy came within societies which were completely closed.
And for so many years.
And for so many years. Now, allow the spring of democracy or the plant of democracy to grow internally. But these guys saw an opportunity in the Arab Spring and they thought, well, let's use a little bit of external stimulus, bring in a little military force from the outside and reorder the society. I kept warning against this in the Security Council. My book has quotations, it has what other people said, what I said, but they said no. Actually what happened is that they had demonized Gaddafi. Right. And Gaddafi also, I mean, in fairness, all 15 members of the Security Council, including India, were a little fed up with Gaddafi.
Of course.
Because, he was let's say, abnormal behavior, fairly tyrannical, personified.
Correct.
And he would, he came and spoke to the UN General Assembly with a Libyan, a former foreign minister, chairing the General Assembly as president of the GA. He takes what looked like the charter, tears it into bits and throws it about it. Now,
yeah, he was a little unhinged anyway.
Little unhinged, maverick, reckless, whatever. Yeah. But what did you go on to do? You wanted to remove Gaddafi. That's the point I make in the book. Exactly. Your penchant for regime change got the better of your sound judgment. Absolutely. And in the process of regime change, and I said in my chapter on Libya, this is going to be very difficult to put this Humpty back. Now, what you talk about happening in Libya, Syria, people think peace is around the corner. I'm not a betting man. I was talking to the UN, some of the people who are working on the UN's this thing with my Norwegian friend, some of the youngsters who were with me in New York and with whom I used to collaborate. And they're very hopeful they'll get it together. And they wanted to talk to me about how it's going to fare. I said, I would just be a little cautious. Absolutely. Let this play out. Let this play out. Correct. There is a multi-layered sectarian conflict. There are all kinds of actors in this. Right. And now Libya, again, it's whether the rebel leader Haftar closes in on Tripoli, on the capital, and how it plays out. But they're not doing this alone. There are forces. I don't want to get into that chapter. Yeah, but Perilous Interventions as a book drives home the point that you've got to leave people alone, and the use of force, military force from the outside will have devastating consequences. I now in Yemen, I find the Americans withdrawing from the Congress has put up a bill saying that there will be no American role there. President Trump is going to veto it. Do you know what's happening in Yemen? I mean, in Syria, you saw the catastrophe taking place, the humanitarian disaster. True. Yemen is 5 times, 10 times worse.
And in fact, there is hunger, there is starvation, all
destitution,
that is destitution. So you're right. I mean, that's why I'm saying that, you foresaw all this and how big powers have to be very cognizant of not imposing their style of democracy. That we'll have to keep in mind. So in that sense, let's look at India's neighborhood. India has always had this love-hate relationship with India's neighbors. But now when we look around, I think the situation has turned around in almost every country relationship that we have, be it Nepal, be it Maldives, be it Bangladesh, we sort of on an even keel.
Individual bilateral relationships have their own dynamic.
Right.
But there is something to be said for a very decisive, clear-headed and purposeful leadership in Delhi.
Exactly.
I mean, if you waffle.
Yes.
If you waffle. I mean, I remember I was sitting in as a senior member of the delegation on the outside. I was ambassador and permanent representative to the UN in New York. And our prime minister then was having a bilateral with the Sri Lankan prime minister. And I was amazed. He would say, Mr. Prime Minister, they are talking about the Tamils, they are your citizens, and you should, hey, wait a minute. Why would any Prime Minister of any country
listen to you?
take you seriously if this is the tone in which you are going to talk to them in an appealing mode. I mean, wait a minute. There's a very basic line from the time that Rajiv Gandhi tried to get into the India-Sri Lanka peacemaking effort. Hey, wait a minute, they may be your citizens, but that has a security implication on me.
Us, yes.
If you go and decimate the Tamils and that unsettles my Tamil south in my Tamil Nadu, hey, wait a minute, I have an interest. So are you as a neighbor and me in a position to sit down together and work it out or not? Similarly, Bangladesh.
Exactly.
I mean, you have a situation where if the Bangladeshis go on providing sanctuary to forces inimical to India's interest, Myanmar, all right. So let's take Maldives, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh.
Exactly.
Nepal. I think it's I mean, I don't want to sound more positive than I should be, but I think if you are serious about how you want to deal with your neighborhood, and if you are serious in terms of the give and take, we don't want to impose our views on anyone else. We are quite happy to allow you to do your thing, but please do it sensitive to my core concern.
Absolutely.
And I think Pakistan, I mean, you know, you have to deal with Pakistan. I mean, there's no denying. But I suspect you'll end up dealing with Pakistan through the Chinese. And we have a much better level of engagement with the Chinese.
Oh, yes.
And I wouldn't judge the Chinese solely on the Masood Azhar issue. I mean, the Chinese are also, well, they're negotiators.
And they're pragmatic.
They're pragmatic, but which means we have to be pragmatic and equally determined in driving home the basic altered equation.
Absolutely. I think in Doklam crisis or Dolam crisis,
for the first time stood up.
And the line that was used by the Prime Minister was that we were resolute on the border, but reasonable in diplomacy. I think sums up our relationship.
Well, let me take you back. I'm glad we are discussing this. How will you remember the last few years of the Dr. Manmohan Singh regime? Last few years. I'll tell you how I'll remember it. The strip searching of a senior Indian diplomat based in New York.
Yes.
Handcuffing, strip searching, looking at the dental
records.
You do this to a senior Indian diplomat, and what did you do?
Nothing.
Nothing. All right, no, some of us did something.
Yes, of course.
We took other measures. Today, can you imagine the kind of support you are getting from a large number of the countries? Stuff which was militarily beyond conceptualization, you're getting that hardware.
Exactly.
Number one. Number two, yes, you have to pay a price for these things. But are you in a position to conduct yourself with greater dignity vis-a-vis the Chinese, the Russians, and the Americans? So leadership makes a world of difference.
Huge difference, yes. In fact, if you look at our relationship with West Asia, or Middle East as we call it, they may be fighting amongst themselves, but we have relationships.
So what is the other thing? You know, I was a young probationer in the policy planning division of the Ministry of External Affairs. My boss was Mr. Damodaran. So since I was attached to the policy planning division, which was basically a joint secretary and an additional secretary, K.R. Narayanan.
Right.
So Mr. Damodaran asked me and I said, what would you like to work on? And somehow I ended up working on the Organization of Islamic State.
Exactly.
The Rabat conference.
Yeah, 69, yes.
69. See where you've come. Right. In 1969, Dr. Fakhruddin Ali Ahmad is invited there. He stays in his hotel. They do a plenary hurriedly because Pakistan protests. All right. This time, your foreign minister, Sushma ji, is invited there. Pakistan goes on protesting. Guest of honor. Pakistan is absent. So strip searching of an Indian diplomat in the last phase of the Manmohan Singh government. Chinese incursion into parts of India there.
Right.
Contrast that when the government was new. Contrast that with what's happening now. I think in many respects, you're seeing a qualitative change in foreign policy. That's why I found the foreign policy segment of the Congress manifesto laughable.
That's true.
It talks about flip-flops and whims of a person. What the hell are they talking about? I mean, so, and I'm afraid a lot of educated guys, senior colleagues of mine, lend credence to that. They should do some introspection.
True.
And I mean, do you or do you not, in your foreign policy framework, whether it's country X or Y, do people take you seriously, more seriously, or don't they? And I think the answer is staring you in the face.
Absolutely. And so therefore, this brings me to my final segment in this interview. You've been the minister now for some time, urban housing and urban affairs. hugely important portfolio. So I want to talk a little bit about what you have learned your first time as a minister at the center or anywhere after being a diplomat for so long. One is, I mean, everybody keeps talking about smart cities, but I'm more interested in what have you been able to do so far?
Well, first of all, when I came into the Council of Ministers on 3rd September 2017, the framework of our programmatic interventions, the flagship programs, was already set.
Right.
My primary task was to accelerate the implementation. Well, let me give you the good news. On Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, we are supposed to produce a total of 10 million homes by 2022.
Right.
So that every Indian citizen will have a home of his or her own. The title has to be in the name of the lady of the house, you know, gender empowerment, fillip to all that. As of last month, before the Code of Conduct kicked in, we had already sanctioned 7.9 million. So a program which is to end in 2022, I say on the record via your esteemed channel that by this time next year, we would have allotted all 10 million.
Wow.
And
so 2 years ahead of
2 years ahead of time, we would have also, today the grounding is about 4.5 million. I would have taken it up to 7-8 million grounding. And it's not in the air. Every beneficiary, everyone who's been allotted after the second installment is paid, we have his or her name, we have their Aadhaar numbers, we have their, how do you put it, their address and all the coordinates. Look, Nitin, the Bharatiya Janata Party has 11 crore members. We got 17 crore votes in the last election. We have 22 crore beneficiaries of these schemes. I'm not talking about Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana. I'm talking about Ayushman Bharat. I'm talking about 8 crore gas cylinders.
Right.
I'm talking about building toilets. I'm talking about rural electrification, every village having that. So if and bank accounts and so on.
Exactly.
And this kind of development, delivery of goods and services, we are going into the election with a positive agenda, number one. Number two, we are going into the election with the credibility of the leader of the BJP, the Prime Minister, way beyond and much higher than any of the others. And third, what are the other guys standing for? They said that they don't want BJP to get an absolute majority, because if the BJP gets an absolute majority, they are out of business. And what do we want is a hung parliament so they can do their buying and selling and manipulate the numbers.
So the negative, basically, approach to thing. I mean, they're just talking about removing one individual as Prime Minister rather than what the alternative vision would be. So that, I think, is...
smart cities, since you mentioned them, the tendering so far is for 140,000 crores. It was 18,000 to 20,000 crores tendering when I came into the Council of Ministers. 140,000 crores. You can see the impact of what a smart city can do to issues relating to women's security. In Surat, it's gone up by 18 to 22%. The ease of living provided to differently abled, or what we call Divyang, the cycle tracks, the pedestrian walkways. Out of the 190 are brownfield. So we have to correct within a defined area, the mess that was made of these cities in the previous 70 years. Plus 10 are greenfield. What we are seeing today is that by the end of December this year, we'll have 50 integrated command and control centers operational. We already have 16. So it's one of the fastest implemented projects anywhere in the world.
Yeah, and I think your metro projects...
Oh, metro. I mean, let me give you... We have added 140 kilometers of metro in the 4.5 years, 5 years that we have been here. Delhi today has a metro system of 350 kilometers.
Exactly.
In the few days before the Code of Conduct kicked in, we have sanctioned metros in Kanpur, Agra, Phase 4 and Delhi, at least 3 of the corridor. So it's now looking back.
Exactly. And that's why it is showing on the ground everywhere, wherever one travels. And I'm sure we will have more occasions to
I
talk
hope
about
so.
this.
I hope so.
I'm sure we will. But thank you very much. As usual, great pleasure in speaking to you. A wide view of the world and then coming down to urban landscape, the urban development that you're doing. Always a pleasure. I wish you...
Pleasure is mine. It's always great to have a conversation with you.